Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 11, Episode 126. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Glad you guys are back with us for this Friday show. Happy early 4th to all of Steelers Nation, and to you, Dave. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Are you staying in shape and staying off the TikTok machine and working on your physical conditioning and all? I think you're going hurricane hunting pretty soon, aren't you?
I was trying not to, but the goal is to not to take a vacation next week down south in Florida. But there's a little hurricane that might be getting in the way, so we'll see what happens. I'll be refreshing the weather channel app for the next 47 times today. But Devin Bush, not a fan of the TikTok, so his teammates might have some issue with that.
I think it was all kind of tongue-in-cheek, if you will. Mostly, it's amazing how that kind of stuff blows up during the off season here. Look, everybody listening, pray for that hurricane to either gain some speed in a hurry and get through there, or stay wide of where are you going? The Keys, right?
Key West, supposed to.
All right.
So is the hurricane. It's also making a vacation on the Keys, so not great timing.
Well, in case everybody hasn't figured it out yet, Alex will be on or is scheduled to be on vacation next week there. So we're going to figure out something to do on the podcast. So you people will be stuck with me and whoever I choose to try to get to fill in for Alex, which would be a tall chore indeed. But carry on, sir.
Could just be you. Could just be the Dave Bryan show for 3 hours.
Oh, that would how miserable would that be? It's hard enough on I like to think that I probably sound smooth on those terrible takes of mine, but the fact of the matter is, I don't know what kind of a process it is for you, but I have to write those damn things out.
I do too. Do you do those in one take, or do you have to break them up? Because I have to break them up.
You're kidding, right?
Okay, I don't know. I'm giving you credit here.
Yeah, you're giving me way too much credit, man. That's my wife gets a kick out of me recording those things because they're literally done probably paragraphs at a time, and then it takes another 15 minutes to go in. We're not giving away too much of how the sausage is made here, I hope, but there is some editing that goes on in even a 3-minute terrible take of mine. And the problem with me too is, man, You think, it's nothing to knock out just a 2-minute terrible take or whatnot. Mine usually go 3 minutes, and I try to make a conscious effort to try to keep those things under 3. But thanks for everybody that listens to those. The feedback and listenership on those have been awesome, and I think we might try to get even. I think Josh Carney to maybe fill in on a couple of those next week while Alex is on vacation there.
Yeah, shout out to Alexa and Mel for doing, I think, a better job than we do on their terrible takes for the weekend. And they'll continue that this weekend as well. Dave, some Steelers news to pass along today. Steelers made a roster move officially yesterday, signing free agent kicker Sam Sloman to the 90-man offseason roster to make room for Sloman. They waived injured defensive tackle DeMarcus Christmas. I know some people were asking and have been asking, why sign a kicker right now? What's wrong with Boz? I think, and you mentioned this in your terrible take yesterday, it's not an issue with Boz. It's just a logistical thing. You won't have 2 kickers going into training camp because you play 4 preseason games. Of course, you have training camp and practices and all, in lieu of a 17-game regular season. So you don't want to have Boz be responsible for all kicking duties this summer to kind of save that leg for, what should be a long season.
Yeah, I think the 2 most popular questions, at least I got yesterday, and you probably as well, was a why and what's wrong. And what's wrong with Chris Boswell? Well, yeah. Chris Boswell posted a clip on Instagram yesterday that we assume is recent of him kicking a field goal and wherever he was working out at. So obviously doesn't look anything doesn't look like anything's wrong with him. And the why, I think you summed it up, and hopefully I did a good job of it as well. My terrible take. This is I got two words for you as to why. Sean Swisham. Basically, and I hate to bring up bad memories, but 2015 Hall of Fame game against the Minnesota Vikings, opening kickoff, I believe, of the second half. Sean Swisham not only had his 2015 season come to an end, but essentially his NFL career as well. And look, there was obviously no, didn't kind of have to preserve your kickers last year at this time because of the whole COVID thing and no preseason and all. But this year, and especially look, like it or not, Boswell missed missed a few games last season with hip and groin injuries. So he is 30 years old now on top of it. You might want to take it easy on him. And in fact, as I stated yesterday in my take, don't be surprised if he doesn't kick at all in the Hall of Fame game against the Cowboys. I think that would be a perfect opportunity to get a good evaluation, in-game evaluation on Sloman, and more importantly, you keep Chris Boswell off the field completely in those instances there. So, is this any sort of a threat to Chris Boswell? I don't think so, and I think you would agree with that, Alex. But
right.
But look, you never know. Things unfortunately happen sometimes, and why not have another kicker in there to alleviate some of the off-season work for Boswell, and at least have a guy that you never know. Maybe you might have to call during the 2021 season.
Yeah, and as you wrote up in the article yesterday, Sloman does have a decent amount of NFL experience. Former 7th-round pick of the Rams last year, played for the Titans, had 10 made field goal attempts and 23 extra points that were good. So he didn't have a great season last year, but I think had one important kick that helped send the Titans to the playoffs, I believe, and just has NFL experience. So it's not some guy that's never kicked inside a stadium before.
Yeah, I would call him an upgrade. A slight, I don't know how big of an upgrade, but an upgrade over Matthew Wright. A little bit stronger leg, I think. I haven't obviously gone back and looked at things like kickoffs. I did research out his 53-yard field goal for Miami of Ohio against Ohio in 2019. I think that was 53 yards. I think he had a couple over 50 during his or 50 or slightly above during his college career there. So. And look, he was a drafted kicker. Not that means a whole hell of a lot, but it means he was wasn't he kind of like the Lou Groza, I don't know, candidate or award winner or something like that during his college career there. So this definitely makes sense, and I would expect him to stick on this roster for probably all of the preseason there.
Mm-hmm. And a quick note for salary cap related reasons, this contract would not expect it to affect the Steelers cap situation at all, correct?
Right. It should be a minimum 1 year, which I think is what did I put? 780,000.
Mm-hmm.
And people said 780,000. Look, that's the NFL minimum for a player with one credited season now. So it might have snuck up on people that minimum salaries, for players are that high now at this point, but that's what it is. But him signing should not even impact the rule of 51, and that means not even going to use up any of the any salary cap space and adding him to the roster. We'll have to see what happens. DeMarcus Christmas should clear waivers today, and if indeed that is the case, he'll revert to the Steelers reserve injured list. I would imagine he has a split contract, which would come with a lowered base salary, and we'll have to find that out. And we don't even know the seriousness of the injury. He might be on that, for depending on the seriousness of the injury. all season or just a couple of weeks, or maybe they reach some sort of injury settlement with him. So we'll just have to see how that plays out with him. Obviously, DeMarcus Christmas was a huge long shot to make the 53-man roster this year. I think at best, and I think I wrote this up in my 90 and 30 series. I think he was on the practice squad, of course, late last season. Probably his best shot was to maybe stick on the practice squad. This year, and right now with that injury, that might end up being hard for him to do.
Right, yeah, very long odds for a guy like DeMarcus Christmas. Dave, I want to talk about UG3, but before we do that, I'm a little rusty here with these interviews. I should have introed it right at the start of the show, but we have on the show a little bit later from now John Eisenberg, longtime guest of the Terrible Podcast, Ravens columnist. You can follow him on Twitter at @BMore. Eisenberg, author of several books, including The League, which was a fantastic book that I read, talking about the upstart of the NFL and how the owners, including the chief Art Rooney, helped form and stabilize the NFL during its early days. So we'll talk to John a little bit later in today's show to get his take on the Ravens offseason.
Always a good time to have John. John's like calling up an old friend who happens to be a Ravens fan, and you say, "Hey, what's going on with your team?" Type thing. So always blessed to have John Eisenberg on the show. You can follow him on Twitter at @BMoreEisenberg. And I think we spent about 33 minutes with him and covered a lot of ground. And I think people will, even though it is Ravens centric, if you will, I think people will enjoy the interview with him.
Yeah, I think so as well. So we'll throw it to that in a little bit. But circling back to UG3, Dave, Was he your terrible take? The other day, right, on UG3?
Yeah, a couple of days ago, and I you know how these things. I don't wake up knowing what my terrible take's gonna be about. Just I don't know, something will get written or tweeted or something, and it'll get me thinking along those lines there. But interesting, and a guy. Look, I mean, we have obviously talked about him in the past, since he was drafted in what was it, the 6th round, I think, out of Akron a few years ago. There obviously has had injuries have been the biggest thing with him so far. Last year he missed time, I think, with both. He went to IR for about 5 weeks or so with a back injury, and then at least you're getting him back. He overcame that. Then he suffered an ankle injury, and then went to IR for good later in the season there. Is this a guy, and pretty much my whole I guess or the end of my terrible take was, I'm not sure I would bet the house for or against UG3 making the 53-man roster this year. I mean, this is a guy that has shown some promise on special teams. Look, he had 5 special teams tackles in, or I forget what the number is, 9 in 11 games that he's dressed for, or something like that. So this guy has a knack to play on special teams, and he didn't play a lot of snaps on defense last season, 30 or something, I think, in a span of 2 games. And yeah, there were a couple warts there, but I think there were a few positives on it. And UG3 is a guy that I think you talked about, quite a bit, not only through his rookie season, but into, I think, the beginning of last season as well too. Where do you come down right now on UG3, and if he can stay healthy, how do you like his chances of making the 53-man roster?
Well, that's the phrase, if he can stay healthy, because he hasn't so far, and he's got those back issues that have been repeated, and you just have to wonder, is it a chronic thing? I agree with the phrasing of you couldn't bet the house for or against him. I guess probably the better question is he inside looking out, or is he outside looking in? I think right now he's probably more outside looking in. The talent's there, and you saw that immediately. He had a really strong training camp his rookie season. The guy's athletic. He can cover. His tackling had improved better than where it was at Akron. And he was a quality special teams player, as you mentioned. But can this guy stay healthy? And it is a pretty competitive group now, with Vince Williams being re-signed, Robert Spillane, Marcus Allen making the move to inside linebacker, the drafting of Buddy Johnson. There isn't a lot of real estate or space available right now for UG3. So can he make it? I think he can. He probably needs someone like Vince Williams to get cut to start creating that path for him to make the 53. But it really comes down to just him staying healthy and having the trust of the coaching staff that he can be a reliable guy for the whole season.
If, and it's a big if, obviously, if it's him instead of Vince Williams that secures, I don't know, 4th or 5th spot, however you want to map this thing out here. How much of a positive is that, and how much if you didn't have Vince Williams, in lieu of that, how much of a negative? You see where I'm coming?
What's the trade-off?
What's the trade-off there?
I think on paper, you're probably getting a better special teams player at this point. I think Vince was a very quality special teams player, and I think he'd still do it, but when he's 30 years old, probably can't do it at the same level he could when back in 2014, 2015. You'd be losing run defense, you'd be losing the leadership, the vocal, just the kind of go-to guy in that room that everyone's going to turn towards. So you're losing some of those intangible aspects, but you are probably going to be better off on special teams.
All right, so going to definitely be interesting to – and look, I mean, this is his 3rd training camp now, right?
Right.
I mean, this guy should have in other words, it should be able to play fast, think less, in this situation. Right. So what did you think about his very limited snaps that he played on defense last season?
I think it was okay. I thought it was fine. It was just such a small sample size, and he was on and off the field, on and off the injury list, and there's so many issues at the position last year, which is kind of hard to gauge. So you probably looked at them better than I have recently, but I thought they were fine, but nothing too great or too terrible.
Right, and that's where I kind of came away. There was maybe a ward or two in there, but I think you saw especially the coverage aspect, looking like he can potentially fit in that way there. So definitely a guy that I think is going to be interesting to track once training camp and the preseason gets underway, because I think quite honestly, I mean, it could go either way with him. And if he stays,
was he on your 53 prediction? I don't think he was.
I don't think he was. I'll have to go back and double check that. But I do think, I honestly do believe that it could go either way with him. I'm gonna pull this up right now here, and inside linebacker. No, I did not. Of course, I have, whatever you want to call Miles Killebrew, inside linebacker or safety. Mm-hmm. Really doesn't matter. It's a roster spot basically. But I don't. I also didn't have Vince Williams on there either. So right. I mean, is it plausible and throw Miles Killebrew out? Let's just assume Miles Killebrew makes the roster as something. Okay. Mm-hmm. I mean, is it plausible we could see Bush, Spillane, Buddy Johnson, and UG3 be those 4?
Where does Marcus Allen fit into that?
I would think maybe if he doesn't make it, then he winds up maybe on the practice squad.
Yeah, I mean, could they keep Allen and UG3? And if they want to kind of consider Killebrew a special teamer, whatever you want to call him, I mean, you could still go 5 that way, I guess, if you keep 4 outside linebackers.
If you had your druthers, would you rather Marcus? If you had to choose between Marcus Allen and UG3 right now today, and assuming both stay healthy, yada yada, mm-hmm. Which way do you go?
It's a really good question. I might just go Allen because I might trust them more. Because I mean, I know the whole you just said, assuming they both stay healthy, but I can't do that with UG3. It just depends on kind of what the status of that back issue is. Is it really a chronic thing, or has he just been super unlucky about it? So I might lean Allen, but it's probably one of those things where you just go into camp and let those guys get after it and see who comes out ahead.
And here we are. I'm the one that's pushing the narrative that he might make it, and you were a guy that.
Right, I was really high on it.
You was a guy. It sounds like I've gone up on him and on his stock, and maybe you've gone down on him a little bit on his stock.
I mean, I still like the guy. He's talented, but I mean, he's like 24, and he's had a couple of major back issues
that's
already.
That's the scariest part.
That
is the whole
better.
back.
You don't get older, and your back doesn't get better.
Right, the whole back thing. I mean, if it was an ankle or heck, even if it was a repaired knee or something like that, maybe But man, when you're talking about backs and necks and things like that, that's really where you kind of get worried with a guy like him.
So I go with an open mind and a clean slate and hope he stays healthy. I think he's talented when he is healthy. Just will he stay that way over a 17-game season? It doesn't look great for him right now, but we'll see what happens.
All
right, Dave, done a couple of studies here, just trying to fill some off-season time and do some kind of deeper dives into stuff that you can't normally do during, free agency and the draft and, of course, the regular season. did a study today on Matt Canada, and I've had this data actually since like March. I've just kind of played around with it and just really didn't know exactly how to best frame it or put it together. But the question I wanted to answer was, does Canada's offense require a mobile quarterback? Because you think about him in college and the pre-snap stuff and some of the option kind of things, and you kind of think that, okay, that lends itself to having someone who's more of a scrambler and can create with his legs. And I went through all the places he's been an OC at in college to see, how athletic and how productive in the run game was his starting quarterback. And there's of course variants. There have been mobile quarterbacks that he's coached, like Chandler Harnish at Northern Illinois, for example. But also he's coached a lot of quarterbacks who weren't that mobile, like Jacoby Brissett, Nathan Peterman, guys like that. And so what I found was he's kind of worked with all types of quarterbacks, whether they were the super mobile guys or guys that were pretty much pocket passers. And so to answer the question of does this offense require a mobile quarterback, no, I don't think it does, which is good because the Steelers sure as heck don't have one.
What was your biggest takeaway from that?
Just that, he's won with different types of quarterbacks. He's won with the guys that were scramblers that rushed for 1,400 yards, and he's rushed for guys who were complete statues. And so he's won with any type of personnel. And I think he's a guy that adapts pretty well to the type of personnel that he has, which is probably just because he's been so well-traveled and been with so many teams and offenses and schemes and systems that, he's never been a guy that's really been in one place for a long time. So he's just kind of had to work with the guys he's had, not really recruit guys that fit maybe his ideal type of offense. So I think that the takeaway was that he can work with a quarterback who is a big old statue like the way Ben is at this point in his career.
All right, good stuff. And you got a lot of info in that post there on SteelersDepot.com that went up. You got yards per carry and 40 times and all like that. So make sure if you're listening to check that post out on Friday or Friday night.
Yeah, and I know the rush yards is a little funny to use in college football because sacks get counted against quarterbacks in terms of rushing yards, so it kind of can mess with the numbers a little bit, but you still can kind of look at the overall numbers and 40 times and kind of, suss out how athletic or not athletic a quarterback was. Another study I did, Dave, a couple weeks ago I looked at Alex Highsmith, his third and fourth down rushers, and just kind of what was Highsmith's plan on third or fourth down, just to get a feel of what kind of moves he used, what worked, what didn't. I decided to take it a step further and do the same with TJ Watt. So I looked at all 118 of his third and fourth down rushes where there was a move and there wasn't like a quick screen or triple team or something like that. And some interesting stats on TJ Watt. I thought the most interesting thing I found, though, because I also broke it down into when he rushed with his hand up and when he rushed with his hand down. And I thought the most interesting part of that was you kind of get a tell about when the Steelers like to stunt. And so when TJ Watt played as a stand-up outside linebacker, there was a stunt with him and the D end to his side about 1/3 of the time. When he had his hand down in the ground, that number of stunt percentage dropped from about 30% to about 10%. And so there's a pretty clear tell, I think, when TJ Watt on third or fourth down has his hand up, it's about a 1 in 3 chance they're going to run a stunt or a game. So that was kind of the first takeaway I had there. That was, a little bit of in-depth scouting, I think, about when the Steelers like to stunt.
I mean, it would obviously. I mean, look, it's a lot harder, especially for someone like him that who can play on his feet so well. I mean, is that huge? I guess how does that translate, to maybe other odd fronts, or guys that use their edge rushers both hand down and standing up, as far as. And obviously it would take a huge, and that kind of data is not out there. But I just wonder how that translates across the NFL for a player similar, to Watt, as far as asked what he's asked to do.
Yeah, I just don't even know how many players there are that do that. A couple, I'm sure. I imagine it's probably not unique to Watt. It's just easier to stunt when you're standing up than you have your hand down because you're firing out, and then your third step, you got to come to the inside. So it makes sense that they're stunting more when he plays with his hand up. But also he just didn't have his hand up a lot. I mean, on third down, he's rushing with his hand in the dirt about, I think, 3/4 of the time. So he's really kind of become a defensive end in that respect. But just kind of a tell and something to file away in a scouting report would be third down, he's got his hand up, decent chance to running a game there. So just kind of a little, again, doesn't mean a whole lot, but just as a self-scouting type of thing.
Yeah, thanks a lot for giving me something that's going to distract me now during games. I'm going to be watching now. I'm going to be only watching him on third downs now to see if I can see if that, how that, and you'll probably be tracking that as well, I would imagine now that it's come to the forefront. I found probably one of the most surprising things, I think, that whether hand down or third down rushes, I guess in total, that chop of his not overly effective.
Yeah, and sometimes the definitions for this stuff is subject to interpretation.
Sure.
But just he was 0 for 8 in his total rushes. The cross drop was a little bit more successful, 2 of 5, so didn't use it a lot, but 40% success rate's pretty solid. The most popular moves he used were the bull and the rip. So he's kind of that. Those are basically his top 2 moves. He wants to use bull and power when tackles want to overset and kind of sit on speed, and he'll use rip to win through the outside. So that's basically who he is, generally speaking, as a pass rusher in those money downs. But what I just found was a lot of things work for him. The bull, the rip, the swim, the swipe, the cross chop, the speed dip, the ghost that he would occasionally use as well. And that makes sense because he's one of the top pass rushers in football. So there isn't a whole lot that doesn't work for him, but the chop was something that was not successful.
And this doesn't mean that he's got bad hands, because he obviously has some of the best hands hand you. In fact, that's one of the things that Kevin Colbert highlighted right out of the chute with Watt after he was drafted there. He's just got really, really great hand usage there. Just for some, I mean, is it just a setup with that, with the chop, and or just just not something that just not a go-to move, I guess, more than anything for him?
Yeah, I'd have to go back and look at all those isolated because I wrote them all down of what move he used to kind of see what the issue was. But just didn't work for him. We're
not going to throw him out with the bathwater or anything, right? We're not going to be looking to cut him, right?
No, I think he's here to stay.
Okay.
So, yeah, I just wanted to do that. And actually didn't take as long as I thought it would. Just kind of easy. And thank God we do that, our charting, because I would not be able to do this effectively without the charting that we do during the season.
Absolutely. Were those the biggest takeaways coming out of that study with him overall? Was kind of the chop and the third down stunts and all?
Yeah, I think just learning that the bull and the rip were his favorite moves, and the chop wasn't successful, and the stunt percentage were probably the biggest things to take away from that post.
Boy, he's got a nice bull, and that rip of his for a guy his size too. Because we're not talking James Harrison side where you can kind of use that shorter stature to get that arm under. Really effective with that rip move, arm under for a guy his size.
Yeah, and that's what Highsmith needs to learn. He needs to get a little more power. He tried his bull. I mean, his bull success rate was, I forget what it was. It was super low. I mean, Watt was at 31%, almost 1 in 3, and Highsmith was, I think, maybe like 10%. So he's got to get stronger. Highsmith does.
Yep, and we've talked about that. The biggest thing with him is adding stuff like that, the power rushes to his repertoire, building upon his his main move and his counter move, and then obviously making sure that he can play better against the run.
Right, and with the bull, it doesn't mean that like you have to literally get stronger or get heavier. A lot of that power is derived from the ground up. So your placement with your feet and your punch, are those being timed out well? Your hand placement, are you getting a good punch in the chest, or are you kind of missing your target a little bit? So some of those things can create power, but you don't necessarily have to get heavy or something like that. So things you can work on without actually having to eat up 5,000 calories a day and get stronger and bulkier in that sense. So interesting studies and numbers there on those guys. Dave, anything else that you've written about you wanted to speak to? Any other articles and studies or anything else that you've read?
We didn't talk about this in our pre-production meeting.
That 5-hour meeting we just overlooked.
Max Stork's talking about Chukwuma Okorafor switching sides. I always find that kind of stuff interesting when it comes to that kind of stuff. And obviously you got a guy in Chukwuma Okorafor now entering his fourth season, has played predominantly. In fact, has he logged any regular season snaps at left tackle, period?
Probably not, because Villanueva literally never missed a snap. So very few, if any.
All right, so with that aspect, this goes back to really kind of one of the things that I think you hit on, earlier in the offseason. There is, will a switch to the left side actually be result in better play for Chukwuma Okorafor because of him coming out of college as primarily a left tackle at Western Michigan. Now, I always like to make sure I do thorough research on this. His freshman year, his first year, I think, at Western Michigan, I think in his limited amount of snaps, he mostly played at right tackle. And then I think his next year, he predominantly played at right tackle. And then his final 2 years were at left tackle there. So it's not like he was just a left tackle at Western Michigan there. So if there was any kind of pushback, I would say when it comes to him, it would be the fact that, look, yes, he was a left tackle at Western Michigan, and probably was in my opinion, but he did obviously progress as a player overall throughout his college career, which obviously you would hope he would. But his better snaps, and probably the thing that got him drafted in the third round, was the fact that he played left tackle his final 2 seasons at Western Michigan there. Max Starks, is a guy that can really talk about such a move with from experience, because he came into the NFL, and didn't he exit college as primarily, I think, a left tackle, and then he goes to the Steelers and kind of cuts his teeth at right tackle there, and then obviously had to make the switch over to left tackle, and for the most part was a fairly reliable left tackle, I think, during his time. Had a few injuries along the way there on top of it there, but I thought the whole talking about Max Starks talking about how writing and being right-handed and left-handed plays a big deal in this. How do you feel after reading or hearing those comments about from Starks on Okorafor, and then knowing that Okorafor wasn't primarily a left tackle, I guess, at Western Michigan? Where do you come in on all this now?
No, I appreciated Stark's viewpoint. I think he articulated the switch and the sometimes difficulty of that really well. And so kudos to Okorafor for having that versatility and being able to play both. I do think, though, left tackle is going to be probably a bit more natural for him. I had forgotten that he had played some right tackle early in his college career, so I'm glad that you brought that back up. But I think obviously his success in the back half of his college career came at left tackle. Because remember, he was teammates with Taylor Moton at Western Michigan, and they kept him Moton on the right side because Okorafor was playing so well on the left side. So I think it's probably a little bit more natural to him. And then just beyond that, I mean, how would you grade Okorafor based on what you've seen so far as a run blocker, just overall? Because I have him at best average and probably a bit
I
below.
was going to say a C+.
Yeah. And so I like him on the left side better. Again, you'll run the ball left side obviously sometimes, but I like him better on the left side than the right side, in this offense, because I want Banner as my right tackle to be kind of the more, guy that you're going to run behind more often than you would Okorafor. So for that reason, and I think that the fact that it is more natural, I think Okorafor's best chance to succeed is going to come on the left side. This
is a big seed. I mean, not only for the Steelers, obviously we've talked about the offensive line, quite a bit, since last season ended and all like that. And obviously a lot of changeover, a lot of question marks with Okorafor's move from right to left being one of those questions within that. I mean, this is a contract year for him. I mean, if he has a better than average season at left tackle and answers 80% of those questions and maybe even becomes a little bit better run blocker, he could put the Steelers in not saying it's going to happen. I think it's obviously a stretch at this point to probably even bring it up, but stranger things have happened, I think. I mean, once again, this is a big season for him. I mean, if he makes this move and it goes seamlessly, and he ends up being a much better left tackle than he was a right tackle, he could put the Steelers in an interesting situation come next February and March.
Yeah, he could. Just depend, because he'll be a free agent. So, as you said, do you have to tag him? That could be an option.
Right. Once again, people say, I don't see how you can talk about the possibility of possibly franchise tagging what we've seen so far. Yeah, but if I don't bring up a possible scenario about that, then what happens if something like that comes to fruition? I mean, how unthinkable is it, I guess? And it is pretty unthinkable, but is it unpossible, as I like to say?
Yeah, I think it's unlikely, but it is possible. I mean, for the longest time in Bud Dupree's career, we thought, okay, this guy's gone. And then all of a sudden we're talking about needing to tag him and try to keep him and all those kinds of things. So careers can change pretty quickly sometimes, especially because Okorafor, not only, I think the switch to left tackle will help, but he'd just be a second-year starter in general, just to kind of have that consistent playing time. And you take your lumps this past season and you learn from him and you get better that way. Obviously, he started a little bit, the seasons prior to last season, but I think just with more time, maturation, you get older. You're a young guy coming out of college. All those things can hopefully help him kind of really put him in the prime of his career right now.
True or false? Okorafor will be a much better left tackle, a marginally better or above left tackle than he was a right tackle.
I'll say true.
Okay, I
mean, the bar was low. The bar was set low in that second part of that question, but I think he's going to be a better left tackle. I think he'll be better than he was last year, and that'll be partially because he's playing left tackle.
How do you think we will be measuring Okorafor's, assuming he stays healthy, yada yada yada? How do you think we will measure Okorafor's 2021 season at left tackle versus Alejandro Villanueva's 2020 season at left tackle? And make no mistake, I know a lot of people were, seemingly stayed down on Villanueva. That guy had a hell of a damn trap, that I think you've pointed out several times. I mean, the guy, unfortunately, so really he was too big, to be honest with you, because you give that surface area and you let some of those smaller pass rushers, and he didn't have the quickest of hands consistently. And if he let people inside of his chest, that's usually when he got in trouble. And obviously, you could say the same thing for all tackles across the NFL. But how do you think maybe, and I won't hold you to this unless you're wrong, how do you think we will come season's end measure? How do you think the two will stack up, 2021 versus 2020?
Yeah, it's a good question.
He obviously doesn't have that trap. He's not a refined technical tackle that Alejandro Villanueva developed himself into. Now, just because Alejandro Villanueva became a technician, obviously doesn't mean he was Joe Thomas in that area. But he became a very technical tackle, and Okorafor is not, in my opinion, to date, isn't that.
Right. Yeah.
Technician, I guess I should say.
To answer the question, I think they'll be kind of similar in the sense of they'll be underwhelming-ish run blockers, but pretty good in pass pro. I don't know if the thing is though they're not the same guy because their body types are a whole lot different. And Villanueva, you're right. Sometimes he was too big for his own good, but sometimes having that length to seal guys up the field when you're 6'8" with probably 34-inch arms helps a lot. And Okorafor is not a particularly big tackle. He's an average to slightly below average type size overall. So he's not going to be able to win and kind of get away and sealing those guys the way that Villanueva could sometimes. So I really don't exactly know what to expect from Okorafor this year. I think the spotlight certainly will be shining brightly on him. But I do think we'll see improvements at least, especially in pass pro, and just hopefully maybe to minimize some of those run blocking issues that he had last season. So I think we'll see improvement. I think it'll be comparable to where Villanueva was at last season. It's probably not a ringing endorsement, but I was higher on Villanueva than most Steeler fans were. But it will be a really critical year for him.
It really is, and boy, you want to talk about, man, if he can hold down that left side and be marginally better on the left side than he was or has been to date at right tackle. That'll go a long way in just everything, I think, offensively, because I mean, obviously the huge question mark will continue to be the rest of the offseason and into the regular season is what's going to happen. What's going to happen with this offense? Greg Cosell, I think, I think the world of Greg Cosell. I know you do too. Anytime he talks, especially about draft picks or schemes or anything, I'm all ears. And he was on the Ross Tucker podcast, and I think he described this very good. He says, because he was asked about doing it with a new offensive coordinator and really new offensive line. He's kind of given his assessment on the 2021 Steelers. Cosell says, I know, well, that's going to be interesting because the O-line right now is everybody's going to say it's no good, but we don't know that it's no good. It's a work in progress, and we don't know where it'll end up. I mean, you really can't discount that whole kind of sentence there. Everybody's going to probably say it's no good right now, but in honesty, because there's so many new pieces and experience, we don't know that it's no good, and it's a work in progress, and we don't know where it'll end up. He goes on to say that that's the point. He says, I would think, and none of us know this, but I would think that with the addition of Najee Harris in the first round, with the addition of Pat Freiermuth as a second-round pick, when they already have Eric Ebron, that you could well see a change in their overall offensive approach. I don't think you're going to get any pushback from you and I on that, right? He goes on to say, you just cannot ask Ben Roethlisberger at this point in his career behind this totally unproven offensive line, and they did draft two guys in the third and fourth round who I both like their tape a lot, but they're rookies. We don't know, but you just cannot ask Roethlisberger to drop back 40 to 45 times by choice. They did that a lot last year. I mean, you don't draft Najee Harris, in my opinion, to give him the ball 9 times a game. He's not that kind of back. He's a foundation feature back. He's a grinder. He wears people out. Well, I'm starting to get kind of worked up here. He's 230. Might need to fan myself off a little bit. He's 230 pounds. I've actually met him, and he's a big dude. And you draft him to give him the football. So I would think that the foundation of this offense will change.
Whew. Yeah, I agree with a large chunk of that. And just to the central point about the offensive line, it is a total unknown. That's what I've said all offseason, is I don't know how good or bad this O-line is going to be because there are so many new faces and moving pieces and moving parts that I don't think anyone can really, even internally, accurately evaluate what this group is going to look like. On paper, it's not particularly great looking compared to the rest of the league, and that's fair to say, but how this thing's actually going to go and work, both individually and collectively, I have no idea. And that's why I kind of call this group, and have called this group, the X factor of not only the offense, but the entire team.
I mean, it's more natural, especially if you're doing this objectively, to have to have more of a negative maybe connotation on what this offensive line is likely to look like, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I understand that point.
But it doesn't mean that the bar from what happened the last year, 2 years, though, really isn't overly high, and how much will having a pedigree back help is not going to hurt, so it's one of those to be continued. I mean, obviously we're going to continue to talk about the question marks about this offensive line, probably more in a negative sense. Because of there being so much unknowns, but it's also something that I will, and I know you will, and I know most of the guys on the site will, or really all the guys. We're going to go in it with eyes wide open, sure. and literally gauge this thing on a week by week basis. Just because we perceive it maybe being growing pains, which are obviously going to probably be some. It doesn't mean that this, that they're going to be awful. I think there's definitely the possibility of this, that them, if they all can stay healthy, gelling as the season goes on.
Yeah, they could, and I think that's reasonable to expect. The question is just how rough will it be out of the gate? as you
Right.
try to figure this stuff out early on, because you really have some issues with communication and recognition and stunt and blitz pickup and, the zone rules and things like that. We'll see. So those guys really have to rep it and get a ton of snaps here in the summer to hopefully prepare themselves for week one.
All right. Think Kendrick Green starts at center week one?
I
Where
do.
you?
Yeah, I've been in that camp. I'm not going to guarantee it by any stretch, but I think he's the best fit for the scheme, and they want to get that guy in the field, and so I think he will.
I agree with that as well too. You think Kevin Dotson will be able to get himself in shape to hold on to that?
Yeah, that selfie looked pretty good. If we could only be that out of shape.
Man, if I could only be half that out of shape, man. Man, he looks like there's some words I can't use on this podcast because there's probably kids listening. He's built like a brick. You know what? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that guy. I mean, I'm very disappointed that David DeCastro's career has come to an end. Man, you know how I am about those guards, man, that have a little bit of athleticism and just kind of, built that way and can move and just, throw people out of the club. I am super excited to see this kid play his second season in 2021.
Yeah. But he can pass protect too. That's the thing. Everyone called him the mauler. I think his pass protection was better than his run blocking last season. So if the unit as a whole can become a better run blocking team, his pass pro was really impressive.
Well, maybe it was you, maybe it was me. I don't know who, but there's one snap of his, I think, from was it from last season or from Louisiana Lafayette? His last season there. Just, total dancing bear,
Yeah. Yeah, I think he's a good one, but we'll see how it looks over a full 16 game or 17 game season, I should say.
All right,
Dave, I think it's a good time to take a break here and throw it to our buddy John Eisenberg. Again, Baltimore Ravens columnist. You can follow him on Twitter at @BMoreEisenberg. Dave and I talk with John about all things Ravens this offseason, so let's throw it to that, and we'll come back in a moment. And welcome back to the Terrible Podcast. And as promised at the top of today's show, we have a special guest. That man is John Eisenberg, who covers the Baltimore Ravens. You can follow him on Twitter at @BMoreEisenberg. He's a Ravens columnist, author of many books, including The League, and told us a little earlier before the show that he's got a couple other projects where he's working on that might involve some Steelers history. So always happy to have John back on the show. John, thanks for being here.
It's always good to be on with you guys.
All right, John, let's talk about the Ravens offseason. And it felt fairly quiet to me, maybe that's just from my outsider point of view, but was there anything about how the Ravens approached their offseason, whether that's free agency, the draft, et cetera, that surprised you, something you didn't anticipate happening?
Surprised me? Not really. I mean, the Ravens are pretty, they operate methodically. And so they identify issues that they think need to be improved, areas that need to be improved, and then they figure out ways to address them. And so I think it's pretty clear in hindsight they made the decision that the biggest issue they needed to address was the offensive line. And so they've been doing that throughout the offseason. I mean, their first move in free agency was Kevin Zeitler. And then they added a little bit later Villanueva, Alejandro Villanueva, Steelers fans know well, not to play left tackle, but to play right tackle. And, if there's any surprise in the offseason, it was that they lost Orlando Brown Jr., who demanded to be traded, wants to play left tackle. And so right in the middle of an upgrade of your offensive line, you get rid of a guy who's made the Pro Bowl 2 out of 3 years. He's 25 years old. But that was a tough situation. So they lost him, but they've been adding guys, and they've moved Bradley Bozeman to center because they had all those snapping issues last year. So, they addressed that. And then the other area was wide receiver. Their passing game was not good enough last year. They definitely needed more targets. So, first they used the draft there. First-round draft pick, Rashad Bateman, and then in fourth round, Tylan Wallace. Some, pretty interesting players. And so slowly but surely they've been addressing these issues. They haven't finished all of them, but which we can get into. But no big shock. I mean, they pretty much tell you where they're going to go early in the off season. This is what we're looking at, and then they set out to address them.
I wanted to ask you about Villanueva because obviously that's the signing that got the most attention from Steelers fans. You said they're going to have him play right tackle. I'm just curious because he really hasn't been a right tackle before. He's been a left tackle, and he's not the best run blocker in that offense. I mean, how do you think he's going to fit in the Ravens scheme? And if Stanley isn't healthy, then I guess Villanueva will play left tackle still.
Well, they're not playing their hand there. That's a good question. If Ronnie Stanley's not ready, and they're certainly hoping he is, if he is not, they certainly have Villanueva sitting there. He didn't take one snap at left tackle in the spring practices. He was at right tackle the whole time. They put in a bunch of other guys at left tackle, Tyree Phillips and Pat McCarry, and they're looking at different guys there. So that leads me to think that maybe they're just saying, he's the right tackle. We're going to do this. We're going to line him up next to Zeitler at right guard, and we're just going to. That's the right side. At this point, I would lean towards that's how they're planning to do it. Is just leave him there and worry about left tackle. So we'll see. But right now, that's what it looks like.
John, always blessed to have you on the podcast and talking Ravens here. Baltimore and the proverbial, it seems like annual rite of passage, throwing the wide receiver mud up on the wall here. Man, they've invested a lot of draft picks, over the years at the wide receiver position. They obviously went out and got Sammy Watkins, and Marquise Hollywood Brown is still there. You add in, they two more during the draft, and Rashad Bateman, a very talented kid, and a guy I watched a lot of tape on. Seems like he was at Oklahoma State for a while in Tylon Wallace there. Man, you just look, Devin Duvernay, James Prochet, Miles Boykin, all these young wide receivers. Surely one, maybe even two, might not end up making this 53-man roster here. How do you what's kind of the early view? And I know it is way early, and there's probably certain things you can't disclose of what you maybe saw or did not see during the off-season practices there. But how do you see this group kind of shaking out, and which one of these young wide receivers or two might be on the outside looking in? I was a big Devin Duvernay fan just on his college tape alone, and just wondering about him as well.
I would say the one that's maybe the most vulnerable is Boykin right now.
Wow.
I think the starting. I think they're going to start Bateman. He looked very smooth in the spring practices. I mean, of course, regular season's a whole other thing, and all that press coverage, that none of these college kids see. So we'll see. But if I had to bet right now, it'll be Watkins, Hollywood, and Bateman are the top three. And then after that, I mean, they Duvernay, they didn't get much of a shot last year. I think he had 26. I mean, they barely threw the ball to him. So, and he is a talented kid. He looks good. He looks good on the spring practices. So, I would say that's a possibility. And then, all the others. I mean, Wallace is a rookie, and they had no intention of taking him. He was just sitting there in the fourth round. He's got huge numbers and amazing plays on video in college. And Eric DeCosta, the GM, said just too good of a player to not take there. And so we just took him. And, He's plays strong. So Wallace, he'll make it, fourth round draft pick. So I would say Prochet, Boykin maybe are fighting for that last spot. And Boykin has started here, and he's the best run blocker. And of course, blocking for the run is really important here. So we'll see how it shakes out. The most interesting thing they've done with the wide receivers is they brought in two coaches. They really talk about throwing stuff at the wall. They bring in T. Martin, the old Tennessee quarterback, who's been a coach for a number of years, mostly in college. They bring him in as a wide receivers coach. And they brought in Keith Williams, who is a guy, I don't know if you're familiar with him. He was a receivers coach at Nebraska going back. But what he is primarily is like a private. He runs like a private. He's a route running guru. And all these guys have gone to him, all these NFL guys, Monte Adams. They go spend time with him in the off season in Nebraska, where he lives. And so he's got this long resume. Watkins was another one they go, and he's just drilling the fine points of all route running, not just the wide receivers, by the way, the tight ends and the running backs. So basically, the Ravens bought his little franchise, his little route running school that he's got going. They just bought him, lock, stock, and barrel, brought him in. And so he and T. Martin are both addressing these wide receivers every day that I saw in practice. And it's pretty interesting. I mean, what I think the goal was, we're going to get more out of these young guys than we've gotten, one way or another. And so they are really addressing it with those two hires, I think, more than anything. Let's see what we've got. Let's see if we can maximize it. So it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out.
Lamar Jackson, obviously, I think due for a big contract. I don't see how you can't give him that this offseason. I imagine we'll start hearing a little bit, maybe more word about that as the rest of the summer plays out here. John, you haven't been videotaping any of Lamar Jackson's passes, have you? I had to find a way to get that in there. Boy, that wobbly duck that he, I don't, the fact that they put that out on the Twitter machine and all like that, and then I think I don't know if it was a joke that they're not allowed to film him throwing passes anymore. But boy, that sure wasn't appealing. How is Lamar look passing overall, if you can disclose such information?
Sure. Well, not a whole lot different, I would say. He talked about how he spent the off season working on steadying his base and doing some things. Fairly interesting interview, the things that he's been addressing. He was up and down. There were a couple of days that weren't as good. These are the open practices. And then there were several that were very good. And it looks like he's got a nice connection with Watkins. The main thing with Lamar is, is he going to throw? Is he going to throw to you? I mean, he just has been it's been tough to get him out of the habit of throwing to anyone other than Hollywood Brown and Mark Andrews. They were, I think half the targets last year. I don't have the number in front of me, but and that's just too many for two guys. So they need a third target, a fourth target, and it's got to be someone he's comfortable with. And so will it be Bateman? Will it be Watkins? Because in the open practices, he was throwing to Mark Andrews again. And, Andrews caught 1,000 passes in these spring practices. He looks, like he's ready for a good year, and it's his contract year. So he looks good. So, Lamar, they may flutter some, and then they're not all going to be what you want, but, he will make enough big plays to make things interesting. They're not too worried about that. And the real question is, can they vary those big plays more with some other targets? And so that's what they're mainly worried about. They're not that worried about Lamar so much as people around him.
Has there been much emphasis on him throwing more to the inside the numbers? Has there been much talk about that? Trying to get him to go inside the numbers a little bit more, further down the field.
Outside. Outside. What they want is outside the hash mark. They want him throwing wide more. He throws over the middle a lot. Throw deep, throw outside. They want it outside. And,
okay, outside.
Yes.
My bad.
Yeah. No, but it's because he throws over the middle to Andrews over and over again, and Hollywood. He's got a nice connection with him. But they want him throwing those out routes. As much as and down the field more, and so there's a lot of focus on that, and the proof is in the pudding, as they say. We'll see whether it happens.
John, speaking of Lamar Jackson, he admitted last year the offense was too predictable. In what ways was it predictable, and do you think that's changed, and will simply just the fact that there'll be crowd noise this year that defenses can't hear some of the calls, will that kind of solve the predictable nature of the Ravens offense?
No, I think the predictability was what I was talking about with the passing. He's targeting two people primarily. And so that's pretty easy. I mean, if you tighten up those guys, you were in pretty good shape. And so that was pretty predictable. Also, I think there may be some different, they may try to do some different looks I mean, they're not with the run game. They didn't feel was too predictable, and it's a very unusual run game with a lot of movement and pulling guards, and it's pretty sophisticated, not easy to predict, and that's a reason why it's been so successful. It's a very unusual run game, and they've designed pretty effectively, and it's not easy to predict, but the passing game was very predictable.
Right.
So I don't know. You may see him under center a little bit this year. Let them do some different looks. So that'll be interesting to see whether that happens. It's been mostly the pistol, so there might be some wrinkles. They're going to try to step it up and make it a little bit more diversified.
Alex has some articles on some pistol and Ben Roethlisberger under quarterback. If you want to take a look and cheat off of them.
Well, they're going to be running those RPOs.
Yeah. I wanted to go back to what you mentioned earlier about Keith Williams. I didn't realize they had done that. It's kind of interesting, kind of a private coach that they've kind of just taken hold of. Has he coached differently than maybe a traditional, receivers coach who worked his way up the ladder through college, NFL? Is he doing anything differently with those guys that are just new to, considering his kind of unique background?
He was a coach at Nebraska, I believe, for 3 years. Position coach there, wide receiver coach. And so, but I think that's it. But he's just sort of a private coach. I mean, other than that, and they all seem to know him. And I think he seems to get along with them well. I mean, he is something on the practice field, very, very sort of effervescent, and there's a lot going on. He's got their attention, that's for sure. I mean, those two guys are in the ear of these receivers over and over again. So it's a real lab. It's a lab. Whether it will pay off, we'll see. But they are going for it with a different level of instruction.
Gotcha. Flipping over to the Ravens defense, how will this team replace Matthew Judon, probably the biggest loss besides Orlando Brown Jr. that they suffered this offseason? Can Owe, the first rounder, who was a really polarizing player, a really raw guy, but crazy athleticism, crazy talent, can he make an impact right away, or how do they view his rookie year potential?
Well, that's a good question, and I think it remains to be seen. That you would think that he would be there to step in for Judon. Whether it'll happen, I don't know. Crazy athleticism for sure. No sacks as a senior, so they feel like he's probably a pretty good run defender. Set a pretty good edge at this point already. But they need pass rush, and that's the biggest hole right now on this team. I mean, that. Even though they drafted Owe in the first round, I mean, we'll see whether he's ready to be, he's 31st overall pick. So at the end of the first round, whether he's ready to be a dynamic player right away as a pass rusher, we will see. And they have not signed a veteran. They brought back let's see, what was I looking at? If you look, it was on ProFootballReference.com, the list of the snap counts. The top 15 guys from last year's defense in terms of percentage, the guys that played the most, in other words, 14 of the 15 are back. The only one missing is Judon. And, they also lost, he didn't play that much though, Yannick Ngakoue. They brought him in, traded for him, hoped he would be the answer for the pass rush. He was not. It just didn't really materialize for him. He just was always a little bit of a one-trick pony, and it just wasn't paying dividends here. So they let him go. So they're very deep in the secondary. They're fine there. They brought back Derek Wolfe. They have Brandon Williams and Calais Campbell up front. So it's veterans. They're older guys, but very solid run defense. And Justin Madubuike, they feel like is going to be a starter there on the D line. They really like him. 3rd round pick from a year ago. I think he's ready to pop. So they're not too worried about most aspects of the defense except the edge. And so they brought back Pernell McPhee. They have Jalen Ferguson, who was the 3rd round pick a couple years ago that hadn't really taken off. They have Owe. They did re-sign Tyus Bowser, who is not an explosive pass rusher. He's just he's a 3-down linebacker. He can stop the run. He can give you what he's got. He's had, 3 or 4 sacks a year, and he's really good in pass coverage. He intercepted a pass in the playoff. So they just thought, well, here's a productive player, not the pass rusher, but we can put him out there. So It remains to be seen how things shake out on the edge. Bowser will definitely be one of them. What's going to happen on that other side? It's a wide open question mark right now.
You sort of stole my lead there going into talking a little bit about the defensive line there. When you look at, kind of the big names up there, Derek Wolfe, Brandon Williams, Calais Campbell, and Pernell McPhee, man, if you show me that list, 3 years ago, wow, but now, I mean, those guys are a little bit older in the tooth now. Williams, I think, has had a little bit of issues. Really, a lot of them, I think, have been had little issues, maybe staying on the healthy side of things. Calais Campbell, I think, missed some time with the calf or something like that. Is there any concern about that defensive front maybe being a little bit long in the tooth at this point?
Definitely. I mean, they're just going with it. I mean, that's definitely a 1-year window with these guys. I mean, they did re-sign Wolfe. Wolfe came here, played really well. Not huge numbers, but was just very solid up front. I mean, they look back when those guys are healthy, playing well, like the playoff game they won against Tennessee where they stopped Derrick Henry. That was one of the few games where the three of them were out there. And it's they're not worried about the ability to stop the run if those guys are out there. But it remains to be seen whether they can stay healthy. As I said, Matt Abike he's the next guy to step in. They're really high on him. He will be a starter here. And for me, that would be a position where they would need to address here pretty soon in the draft. They need the next generation there, but they're going to go with these guys this year and see if they can keep them healthy. And, Campbell had missed some time last year and, had COVID. And he has been a guy that has not had many injury issues. He's been somewhat of an Iron Man, so I know he was disappointed about it. And he did talk, by the way, his interview talked a little bit about, whether this might be his last year. I mean, he's getting to that point, 34, 35 years old. So we'll see. He can still play football. Whether he'll be as dominant, we'll see. But that's where they stand up front.
Patrick Queen, obviously their former first-round draft pick. Another year experience now. What ways did you see him? Did you see him visibly kind of take that next step either towards the end of last season or so far during the off-season portion? I mean, is he going to be the actual quarterback now of that defense and be more responsible, making more of those calls or whatnot?
He is not going to do that.
Okay.
The green dot is Chuck Clark, the safety. They were happy with the way that went last year, and he's a very solid signal caller and the smartest player in the huddle, and they're happy with that. Of course, he's in the last year of his contract, so we'll see. Queen, the steps progress did not happen at the end of last year. He struggled. He had a ton of tackles. He struggled some in pass coverage and in reading defenses and reading offenses. Admittedly, it happened in real time. He said, I'm struggling here. He looked at spring practices definitely like he was, because those are just basically 7-on-7 anyway. It's
right.
Passing camp. And so he was definitely better in pass coverage. And he looked lighter. He said he'd come in too heavy, that the lack of being in the team, physical, with diet and exercise and weight training, he's just in better shape, thinner, and he thinks he's going to be quicker. And so we'll see. You definitely have to cover the pass, defend the pass, and that they're not too worried about his ability to read stuff and make, sideline to sideline. He's quick enough. It's really his pass coverage, and they feel like he should be improved this year. I don't think they're going to have too many problems with him.
Before I turn it back over to Alex here, is he the biggest question mark on this defense right now? Hey, look, their secondary looks fine. Marcus Peters, Marlon Humphrey, Elliott, and Clark back there on the back end. They look fine in the secondary. Obviously, a little long in the tooth up front there, but obviously some prime time experienced players there. So would Patrick Queen basically be the biggest question mark when it comes to that 2021 Ravens defense?
No, I would say the number one question is the edge, the ability to rush the passer.
Okay.
That would be the question mark. Where's it going to come from? Between losing Judon, I mean, it was a 3-down player, a good player, productive player. They'll miss him. I mean, he didn't play a super high snap count. They rotated guys in and out, and they kept him fresh, and they managed him well, and he was productive, but he wasn't on the field all the time. They need to find pressure on the edge somehow, and certainly they want Owe to be that player eventually. Whether he'll be that player as a rookie is a big question mark. And Jalen Ferguson came in here, I think he's the NCAA record holder for sacks, Louisiana Tech, and it hasn't translated yet. He has, I think, 4 in 2 years. And so could he become the player? Pernell McPhee, long in the tooth, a great player, but you're not going to get a ton of sacks. So where's it going to come from? Bowser, they didn't bring him back because he gets to the quarterback. So you just wonder where it's coming from. That to me is the big question.
Had a couple of questions about the rookie class, John. Is Sean Wade taken in the 5th round? Is he going to be an outside corner, slot corner, make the move to safety? What do the Ravens envision playing him?
I think he's slot. I think he's a slot corner. That's where the narrative that they rolled out was that he was very, very good in the slot at Ohio State in 2019, very bad outside in 2020. And so he's a slot. So slot, I mean, Tavon Young is the slot cornerback. He's been injured a lot. He missed last year again, basically all of it. And so Sean could be the answer there. I mean, they what they've done when Tavon, Marlon Humphrey's played a lot of time in the slot in the last couple of years with Tavon being down, and they really want Marlon on the outside. Marlon is their best cornerback. Is a great player that can play in a lot of places, but they'd rather him on the outside. So they really don't want to make that move again this year. So if Tavon's healthy, he'll be the guy. They do have Sean as a possible another one. They have an undrafted free agent from a year ago, Khalil Dorsey, who actually played in some games last year. Looked very strong in the rookie camps. The spring practices. That's a guy I think is going to make this team and maybe on the field some. Another one of these Ravens undrafted defensive players. I think they may have found one there. He may be part of the solution in the slot. It's a name nobody really knows, Khalil Dorsey, but I think he'd be on the team. And he may be out there. So they have some options in the slot. Sean is just another one.
Right. And I know it probably doesn't mean a whole lot in the grand scheme of things, but I was just kind of curious why the team drafted Ben Mason in the 5th round when they had Patrick Ricard on the roster. And Mason reminds me a ton of Ricard, both play defensive line a little bit, both kind of old school fullbacks. But just does this guy have a chance to make the roster? Do you think they can carry both Ricard and Mason on their 53?
That's a good question. A lot of people are asking that question. It's a fair question. Can he play tight end? He is sort of the same player. I don't know whether they're looking at him down the line as the next guy to replace, if Ricard, his time is up here, and he's under contract this year. I'm blanking on whether he has a year after this. I'm not sure that he does. So, maybe that's how they would get him through. But, to get through this year, I don't think he would be playing much. And whether they can sneak him onto a practice squad would be a good question. 5th round draft pick. I don't know. He plays the kind of football that the Ravens play. They like guys like that, and just sort of raw material that they can work with. So I don't see him having much of an impact this year. But they like the way he plays, and they've drafted a lot of raw guys like that. And Nick Boyle was another one. He was a pure tight end. Was very raw when they drafted him, and they just feel like, if we can hold on to him and work with him, we can develop him. So Ben may be the next one, but it doesn't happen every time, so we'll see.
And Ricard is a free agent after this year, so that does make sense. That maybe Mason is the heir. Yeah.
All right, 30 minutes. 30 minutes down, 3 more hours to go, John. Hang in there. No. When you look at, I don't believe they had I don't believe they made a selection after the 5th round. I think they had 3 5th-round selections there, and obviously, you would think the top 4, ending with Tylan Wallace. Those 4 are pretty much locks to make the roster. It sounds like they're pretty high on Shaun Wade out of Ohio State too. Probably a good chance with him. Dalen Hayes is a guy that sometimes I wonder if we should call it Ravens Depot instead of Steelers Depot, because we sure seem to scout the kind of the same players we think that would make good Steelers, and I think the Steelers had a little bit of interest in Dalen Hayes as well too. And you just talked about Ben Mason, who really a 5-tool player, if you will, can play fullback, can play H-back, can play tight end, can give you something on special teams. Just an old throwback player. I guess the question is of kind of Dalen Hayes and Ben Mason, is there a good chance one of those two or both of those two don't make the 53-man roster? And oh boy, don't let Dalen Hayes get exposed to that waiver wire.
Yeah, I think Hayes makes it. I mean, they're sure they're looking for anybody that can rush the passer. Hayes looked good, and he's a fairly polished player coming out of Notre Dame, and they like
good kid too.
Very, very good kid. Great kid, and they love him. I mean, and they won't keep him for that reason alone. But so I think he's got a chance. Listen, if you can come in here at that position in 2021 and get to the quarterback a little bit, you're going to be on the field. So, I think there's a chance he'll have an opportunity to show what he can do, and he didn't do badly in these spring practices. So, they'll see where it goes, but it's an opportunity for him for sure.
No chance that Sam Cook or Justin Tucker have a change of heart and decide to retire. Those guys have been there like 25 years. I mean, there's no sense really asking you much about special teams, because those two guys have been money. I guess the biggest question when it comes to special teams is, this goes back to my guy Devin Duvernay. I would assume right now he's probably the slotted guy to be the returner once again. But what if he doesn't make the 53-man roster? Who's most likely to be the returner there?
Well, Prochet ran back punts most of the season. He wasn't super explosive, but he caught everything. Very sure-handed. He would be the punt returner. He may still be the punt returner. Whether he makes the team who knows? But they actually have had some change. These guys talk about someone who's been here forever. Morgan Cox, the long snapper. He was a cap casualty. He's gone. He plays for the Titans now. They let him go, and he was like all pro last year, Morgan Cox, but it was a salary cap situation. He'd been around a while, and they hated to let him go. So they have Nick Moore now, a guy that was on the practice squad last year, and they felt they could trust him, and he's a young player, and they'll start that slow salary climb over again, save some money. Whether or not, those situations can come back to bite you, but they felt they could get away with it. And so there'll be some eyes on those snaps. There were no problems in spring practices. So, but they have made transition there, so it's something to watch.
All right, my final question before Alex gets you out of here. When you look at the AFC North, obviously Baltimore and Cleveland are the two teams that most everybody has slated to one make the division or win the division, the other probably a wild card there. My kind of early look at this thing is, man, the AFC North's going to beat the snot out of each other. I mean, they have tough schedules outside of the division. They obviously play each other twice in the division there. I mean, it really sets up for a to me kind of I could see 9-8 or 10-7 at best, maybe winning this division. Where are you right now? And obviously, a lot of things can change between now and 80 something days from now, from when week 1 rolls around. But how bullish are you at this point on the 2021 Ravens? And I mean, could you see this being multiple 9-8 teams in that division? I guess.
Well, certainly that's a possibility. I'm pretty bullish on them. I think they look pretty good. And I agree with you. I think it's going to be very competitive. I think they're going to. And what's really interesting is the schedule. Certainly for the Ravens, everything's backloaded. It's all in the second half of all their games against Cleveland and Pittsburgh are late in the season. So I can't remember. I think it's week 10 before they see anybody. Week 11, maybe. So it's all late. And so what's going to happen is these teams are going to go around, play these other teams. Certainly the Ravens are going to play outside the division for months. And I think the feeling is they feel like they better make some hay while they're doing that because it's going to get tough late in the year. And late in the year, they also have they have the Packers, the Rams, a lot of tough games. Early on, they do have a game against the Chiefs, home game against the Chiefs, Sunday Night Football. So I think I agree. I mean, the AFC North, they always beat each other up. I don't think this year's going to be any different. I'm bullish on the Browns. I think they look good. I think the Browns have addressed the shortcomings they had with their defense. They look dangerous, And I always, I'm not just saying it because I'm on this podcast. When people downplay the Steelers, I'm always like, they know how to put a winning team on the field. I'm always very hesitant to say, forget about the Steelers, because you don't. It's just a bad idea. So, I think it's going to be very competitive. I think the Bengals are, they're going to have a tough time winning many games. I think those are three pretty good teams. So it'll be a dogfight for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. John, appreciate your time. As always, I know we could talk to you for 3 hours. We won't make you do that, but be sure to follow him on Twitter at @BMoreEisenberg. And I knew you teased before we brought you on live here about a project you're working on. I don't know how much you want to tease that, but it sounds like it's a really cool book you got working on.
Yeah, it's in the writing stage right now. I'm working on a book on the history of black quarterbacks in the NFL. Going all the way back to Fritz Pollard, the first one in 1921, wow. And through today, where there's so many black quarterbacks doing well. Obviously, was not the case for a number of years. There was years and years of denied opportunity and discrimination, and it was a tough situation. Then some slow generation of pioneers who made it through, including Joe Gilliam with the Steelers. I've already written a chapter on him, and I'm going to go back and do some more reporting on it. Fascinating story and sad tale. Talented young man. So there's lots of interesting storytelling, and to see how it all sort of evolves and how the door finally creaked open ever so slightly and has now been kicked open wide. I'm in the middle of telling that right now, and the book won't be out for it'll be more than a year, but that's my next one.
Yeah. Can't wait for that, John. As always, thanks for your time.
All right. My pleasure. Thanks a lot.
And again, our thanks to John Eisenberg. Be sure to follow him on Twitter at @BMoreEisenberg. Really excited for that upcoming book he has. I know he said it'd be about another year plus until it comes out. But, man, I cannot wait to read that chapter on Joe Gilliam.
Yeah, we had a little, quick talk with him, but before we got on the air about it, boy, Joe Gilliam, man, you go back and you look at some of those highlights, man. That arm that he had makes you kind of wonder how things may have played out. It's one of those wormholes I think that you could go down and wonder what direction maybe the Steelers go in. Franchise-wise, because Gilliam was when 72.
As in when he was drafted.
Yeah,
72, 11th round.
All right, so makes you kind of wonder, because Bradshaw obviously had his struggles, right?
Yeah, but it was a whole three-headed race of Hanratty, Bradshaw, and Gilliam, and none of those guys could figure it out until Bradshaw finally took hold of that. And what would that have been? 74, I guess it would have been. 73.
Obviously, as a first-round draft pick, you're going to probably have a little bit more patience, but it seemed like patience was wearing thin early on, right?
And Hanratty was a top pick, too. I forget. Was he a first-round pick?
Wasn't he like second or third?
Was he second? He was second-round pick in 69, but still a top pick.
Right. So, it's not worth spending a lot of time on, but it does kind of make you wonder what, had Gilliam, taking the reins a little bit better. He was strong arm, man. That's one thing that just continues to stick out to me when I go back and look at his tape. He had a cannon, man. But definitely look forward to John does such a great job with these books. And listen, follow John on Twitter if not already. Be More Eisenberg on Twitter. Reach out to him and say hi during the off season. And if you want to buy one of his books, easy to find on Amazon.com or go to his John's website as well too.
The last thing I'll say on Gillum is that, and if people want me to do a video on this, I probably will. I was kicking around the idea, or a couple weeks ago actually, about what was like the worst start in Steelers history, who had just like the worst start. And it's probably his. His first career start came in '73 against the Dolphins. He went 0 for 7 with 3 interceptions against Miami that day, and they pulled him in. Almost came back and won that game, but just watched that and just kind of that was the start of his career. Got a little bit better, but unfortunately didn't get a whole lot better the rest of the way.
I mean, could you say that? Is that the 1972 Dwayne Haskins? I mean, he had the arm, and if there's one thing that you can say about Dwayne Haskins is he can sling it, man. Just didn't, if memory serves me, the accuracy wasn't all that, and didn't do a great job of, and I mean, obviously 72. I mean, you're a lot different game and whatnot, but didn't overly do a great job of reading defenses and throwing away from certain coverages from what I remember. Do we have that game? Do I have that game? Do you have that game?
Of which, the 73 game?
Yeah.
No, I found it somewhere else.
Okay.
You may have it stored away. You probably do.
I probably have it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, but go back and
you got to break down all of his throws or no?
I wasn't sure what I was going to do. It was going to be a video, like a YouTube thing, and just kind of like a series. But I didn't know it was going to be too mean-spirited because obviously his career, obviously the racial stuff and off-field stuff and all that. I wanted to make sure I was not being disrespectful about it. Right. But if people want to me to do a deep dive into it, let me know. All
right. Good stuff, Alex.
All right, Dave, what else you want to talk about? Probably all the big stuff here for the week we covered. If there's nothing else for us to talk about, we can get to the Friday Five, the reader emails. I was looking up Friday Five, and reader emails and close out today's show.
All right, let's get one from Ryan Roberts from Tulsa. I think, Ryan, I don't remember seeing Ryan's name in here before here. I listen to you guys religiously and love the site. What would you say is our worst playoff loss? He says losing last year to the Browns or losing to Tebow in overtime. He says, my initial thoughts was losing to Denver. Watching Tebow throw is like watching an angry gorilla throw coconuts. Wow. You thought I have some colorful analogies. But Cleveland gave them so much but Cleveland winning gave them so much legitimacy in the media. Oh man, take your pick. Most recently, especially in the in the Tomlin era, that Denver game is one they obviously should have won. The game against Jacksonville several years ago. I mean, with Blake freaking Bortles beat them, and really at that time, I think that offensive line of theirs had some issues on top of it there. I mean, if there was a playoff game maybe in Tomlin's tenure here that you probably would have bet the farm on for the Steelers to win, it probably was that one.
Yeah, they've lost some weird ones in some weird fashions for sure. I would say losing the act of losing to the Broncos was worse than the act of losing to the Browns, but the how do I want to frame this? But the way the Browns beat Pittsburgh by just running up the score early and just kind of really not being a very competitive game was more depressing than a closer game against Denver, if that makes sense at all. Because I could have accepted losing to the Browns, I guess, in one sense. But in that fashion was just so shocking to be down 28-0 after the first quarter. Just you could have never imagined that if I guessed a million different ways that game would have played out. So, but to me, the answer would be just any of those AFC title games against the Patriots. Just because you're so close to Super Bowl, like 0-4, you thought it was your year, 15-1, magical run, Ben rookie quarterback. This is going to happen. And then Rodney Harrison picks off Ben and just broke my little kid heart. So, and then it happened again and again. So those things were always, to me, the most crushing because you were just so close to a Super Bowl.
Man, the problem is we had too many choices here to choose from.
Yeah, only 3 playoff wins the last decade. Super disappointing.
Yeah, super disappointing. And yeah, look, I mean, recency bias obviously played, but once again, I guess most disappointing. I mean, like I said, I would have, and I think I did bet half the farm that they would have beat Jacksonville in that in that game with Blake Bortles there, and I mean that would be my choice, I think.
Yeah, but as you said, too many to choose from. That's the problem.
All right. Why don't we kind of end it there so we don't run too terribly long here? I'm looking to see if we missed anything in here that sticks out here. I don't think so. But so with that, why don't we go ahead and wrap up this show? You're going to be gone next week, so you won't be on the podcast next week. It doesn't look like. So I will obviously figure something out there for both Tuesday and Friday. No, that means no Monday night Facebook or YouTube live session, right?
Right. Yeah, we'll come back the following Monday. What is that? The 12th or something.
All right, and then obviously we're going through the AFC North beat writers here, so look forward to more interviews with those on the Browns and the Bengals as we progress further into the offseason here. So I guess with that, shout out to John Eisenberg once again for coming on the show. Really enjoy having him on. We hope you buy his books and reach out to him on Twitter. Speaking of Twitter, you can follow me on the Twitter machine at Steelers Depot. You can follow Alex on Twitter at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. The inbox has been a little bit light lately, so now's the perfect time if you're a first-time emailer. And we're some of our great ladies that listen to the show that normally like to chime in. So shoot us an email, a question, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. Now's the perfect time to get those in on the show. And as we said, I will be back, I believe, on Tuesday with somebody on the podcast with Alex on vacation. And as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.